Thank you. I am Barry Peters, and I'm of 11 candidates running for City Council this year. There's only one who has experience of being on the council, and that's my re-election race for the at-large position. What I bring to this service on the City Council in Bainbridge is a background that's a mix of caring about the community. I worked in an anti-poverty agency earlier in my career, one very similar to the one here in Bremerton. I also formed an organization called Sustainable Bainbridge, which is all about the economics and environment and the social organization of our community. And I also had a long career both in legal work and in business. I was a senior manager and advising attorney for many years to a very large telecommunications company, where I was responsible for downsizing that organization by about 10 or 20,000 employees in a 100,000 person organization over about 10 years. What I bring to the City Council race this time, and the reason I want to be re-elected, is because we have worked a remarkable transformation in Bainbridge. When I came into the City Council in January of 2008, this country's biggest recession had started a month earlier. Cities across Washington were down in revenues. The city of Bainbridge Island lost 10% of sales tax. It lost half of its excise tax from the sale of homes. It lost half of the money that usually comes in from permit fees and building fees for new homes, because people weren't building new homes. We went through a perfect storm. A year later, our ratepayers lost confidence in us, and 2 citizens sued our sewer utility. It kept us from borrowing funds for an ongoing $15 million improvement to our sewer plant. And we were in the midst of other legal difficulties, and furthermore, the last several years had resulted in a loss of our reserves to the point where Moody's eventually sent us a letter and says, "You've got virtually no reserves, we're going to put you on credit watch." What's happened in the last year is quite phenomenal. Our community voted for council manager form of government. Our council got down to business, and we hired an outstanding city manager. Today, our finances are on a very sustainable footing. I'm wearing a smile today because I just checked in with our finance director this morning. Our mid-year financial report says we're on track to have reserves at the end of this year over $4 million from zero 3 years ago. We not only have reserves in our general fund, but by the end of the year, the water utility is likely to have $4 to $5 million in reserves, and our sewer utility will be refinancing itself after 2 courts decided that that lawsuit was invalid. So there's a remarkable transformation underway, and I'd like to tell you more about it during the rest of the hour. Thank you.
My name is Stephen Bunkowski, and I'm running at the at-large position for City Council of Bainbridge Island. My wife and I bought our first home on Bainbridge Island in 2001. We moved here full-time in 2007. We moved here by taking a road trip around the United States, 26,000 miles in 8 weeks with all the coastal communities, and chose Bainbridge Island as the ideal place for us to retire to. Ideal because it had the natural beauty that we were interested in, the culture that it had in terms of the arts and the music and farms and the roads, and also the people were a group of very caring people. So those are the things that brought us to Bainbridge Island in 2007. However, with the downturn in the economy, those things are in jeopardy today, and they continue to be in jeopardy. Everything says that the financial future of Bainbridge Island and the nation whole is not going to improve anytime soon. And so I'm running for City Council because the work that has been done to date is still unfinished, and I believe we need to have a more sustainable plan than we have in place. We need to be able to balance our budgets. We need to build up our cash reserves. Last year we were supposed to have cash reserves of approximately $1.5 million. After all the auditing was done, reserves were under $200,000. which tells me that we didn't have a good handle on what our budgeting process was and our expenditures. And it was as a result of that, in that point in time, that Moody's did go through the putting us on credit watch. We need to restore the valued services that have gone away. We need to encourage small business. In this last year, the second largest source of revenue for the city is sales tax. So almost the only revenue increase that the City Council voted for was to increase the business tax, the business penalties, which is not the way to encourage small business. My experience is I was a vice president of Northrop Grumman. What I did for Northrop Grumman was to consolidate and reorganize organizations across the United States. In doing that, I was responsible for the employees, the budgets, and interface with state, local, and federal laws.
Were you up in the Northeast?
It was down in Southern California. It was with Northrop. We acquired Grumman, and then I moved to New York to manage a facility in New York, eventually closed that facility, closed facilities in California, relocated those facilities to Chicago, had to build facilities, went through a process where I wound up moving approximately 3,000 employees from different coasts in and doing all the packaging associated with that.
So you've moved around?
I've had to move around, that's correct.
Kim.
Hello, my name is Kim Hendrickson. I am incredibly grateful for this opportunity to talk about my positions and why I'm running for council. I want to just take a moment to especially thank the Sun for really what I think has been excellent coverage of the campaign so far. As some of you might know, there's a really interesting debate going on in the comments section of one of your stories. Your interest in our local election is deeply appreciated by our community, so thank you. Let me say something about myself and then briefly something about my platform. I moved to Bainbridge Island 4 years ago from Washington, D.C. My background is in academia. I'm a political science instructor. I've got local politics in my blood. I love it. Nothing interests me more than figuring out what makes successful cities successful and how to turn around unsuccessful situations. Since arriving on Bainbridge Island, I have submerged myself in local, cultural, and community affairs. I ran many successful community events. I've worked for a nonprofit volunteer and board member. I've worked for this city committee called LTAC, and I currently am the Secretary Chief Examiner for the Civil Service Commission, which is the organization on Bainbridge Island that largely determines who gets to work at our police department. I love city politics. I love getting involved in local affairs. Many people ask me why I'm running for city council. Part of it is that it's just in my blood. This is a way that I most enjoy being a resident of Bainbridge. Part of it is because of optimism. Many of the things Barry said today, I not only understand, but I very deeply appreciate. I feel like Bainbridge Island in many ways is heading in the right direction. I'd like to be a part of that process, use my skills and my talents to help move Bainbridge on the path that it's already on. Another reason I'm running, frankly, is because I'm frustrated. For all the excellent indicators that I see of positive change, there are still many things going on Bainbridge, and particularly within Bainbridge government, that I think need to be resolved and addressed squarely. I'm talking now about more fiscal management and more focus on basic services. I'm talking about our police department. I'm talking about the feeling of distrust, unfortunately, many people feel when they're thinking about their city government and their city officials. I hope I have a chance to talk about my specific platform in the remaining conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have been reading the debate about the water rate. No, I appreciate how you guys have been involved, and I think it's really actually kind of informative. And that was the first question that I wanted to get everyone's opinion on, whether it's wise for the city to continue running a water utility, or if it's time to move it over to the public facilities district for the county. Of course, we'll let you guys speak, but I'm going to ask Stephen first, since I'm not sure what your opinion is on that.
Well, approximately a year and a half ago, the the ratepayer, 2 years ago, 1.5 to 2 years ago, the ratepayers filed lawsuit because of the cost associated with the utility and moving monies around between the utilities to support other services within the city. At that time, there was a proposal made and a study made from Kitsap Water that said that Kitsap Water could run the water utility at about half the price. And that went on deaf ears as far as I can tell, because nothing happened for about a year and a half. The city then commissioned its own study, came up with the same result, and also said that, gee, you could reorganize the existing staff to reduce the cost of Bainbridge providing that service by getting rid of a couple of people and realigning some of the people within the organization. And they could achieve a 35% reduction, and they could get a 45% reduction, which was what the Kitsap Water had said, if they then absorbed and got other water sources, got contracts with other water sources to spread the base across. I'm a believer that it ought to be outsourced, and that Kitsap should take over the water utility because I believe that the absorption of those employees into the other organizations needs to stop. The work that is being done by the different elements within the city, you have to know what that costs. And when you have overheads that are moving around as a manager, you really don't know what your services cost. And so if you're trying to understand and get to a basic budget that says here are the required and mandated services the city must employ, you have to know what those services are. When you have a mix across the board where overheads from the water utility get absorbed into other organizations, where the fees for insurance get absorbed into other organizations, you can't pull out what the cost of a particular service is, which I think is absolutely critical as you're trying to go through and define what are the services that need to remain and what are the services that you need to evaluate whether you want to keep or not. There was in part of the discussion that you had in the Kitsap Sun, I believe it was said that, well, we have some people that are cross-trained to do the billing. I believe that there are other ways to do billing other than having city employees. Most cities and almost all companies use outside sources to write paychecks, to do billing. It's not a function of organizations generally, because that's not what they're good at. That's not in a newspaper. That's not what the Kitsap Sun is good at. It's good at doing the newspaper and the reporting. It may not, and to have to go and have special people to worry about writing the paychecks, writing the bills, is typically not done. And so I would support having those functions that the city is not mandated to do, find other sources to do that at a much less expensive way of doing business.
Okay, thank you. We'll let Kim go.
Would you restate the question?
Oh, I just was going to get your opinion on whether the city should look into outsourcing its water utility, or if it's more effective to keep that.
Right, so this is an issue that those of you following the comments know that I'm very passionate about. We received an offer from PUD that I think is extremely attractive, and I think we should take advantage of it, and take advantage of it quickly before it goes away. The strength of my opinion on this issue, I think, has to do with two things. First, it has to do with ratepayer grievances that I think are incredibly well-founded. This is a group of ratepayers that, in my opinion, and in the opinion of several city-paid consultants, have been overcharged, and by that I mean charged at a level high above corresponding cities, and at twice the level of corresponding cities for many years. And some of these people paying these very high rates, are the people on Bainbridge Island that are least able to afford it. Our downtown area, where much of our city water utility delivery occurs, it's where our seniors live. It's where our low-income residents live. The fact that the rates are so high with this group of people in particular particularly upsets me. And if Kitsap PUD can deliver at 50% of current costs, that's something I'm extremely interested in taking advantage of. Second reason I'm interested in doing a transfer and why I'm particularly interested in the Kitsap PUD. This is something that's come out in our comments to each other, and I think it's very important. Bainbridge Island takes the issue of local control very seriously, and I think it does in many instances for good reason. We're a self-governing city. We take a lot of pride in our independence, and I think in many contexts the issue of local control is something that's very admirable. But there are some issues and some areas that I think the topic and the conceit of local control is more damaging than it is productive. Precisely in the area of water delivery. This is one place where I think local control is actually very counterproductive. I like the idea of sharing a water utility with the Reds of Kitsap, because I think it can encourage a sort of cooperation. It can encourage an interdependence where if there's water shortages in one area, it can be transferred to another area. And it also takes advantage, of course, of economies of scale and the fact that the Kitsap PUD manages 52 districts and has lots of experience in this area, while, of course, Bainbridge Island has other issues to focus on. Again, I feel very strongly about this issue, both from the perspective of the poor ratepayer who's been suffering under the system for a while, and from this larger perspective of where it's very important that we cooperate with the rest of the county instead of waving the flag of ferocious independence. Sometimes I like it and sometimes I don't.
Gary.
I've been studying the issue for about 2 years. I was the first council member appointed as the liaison to our Utility Advisory Committee back in May of 2009, and for most of that time I was undecided. I've decided because the latest independent study that came out about a month ago shows how efficiently and effectively we can lower the rates to the point where our water rates run by the city would be very comparable to the water rates offered by Kitsap Public Utility District. So my view is that the right answer is cooperation with KPUD rather than giving our utility away to KPUD. I can imagine from Steve and Kim's viewpoint that it's confusing and it seems attractive because whenever there's a lawsuit floating around, there's lots of PR from the folks who believe in the lawsuit who want to say a lot of things about the city. I can only tell you that both the Kitsap Court and the Appeals Court rejected the claims that came before them completely out of hand. And when I've looked into the facts, what I find is that the city's economies of scale are helped by delivering local water to local customers in the same way that we deliver local sewer service in Winslow to the same local customers. And we also deliver stormwater utility services. In fact, our city has several lines of business, including we're in the business of helping builders get building permits. Each of those separate lines of business benefits from the other. We have a billing clerk who bills 2,000 customers for water and 2,000 for sewer. Nobody is offering to take our sewer utility. If we give away our water utility, we've got a billing clerk who's still sending out 2,000 bills and answering 2,000 customers, but all of that one person's salary is now being charged to sewer. So the economies of scale of having a city that has a workforce that takes care of water repair problems on Monday, sewer repair problems on Tuesday, and stormwater problems on Wednesday, and also fits in street repairs from time to time. That kind of cross-training is the heart of what makes a city efficient. I was surprised to hear Kim say that she likes the offer from KPUD because KPUD is asserting its right as a public entity to take our water utility for nothing. They would like us to give it to them. No charge for the water rights that we have in the system, no charge for the $12 million of infrastructure that we have in the system, and no charge for the fact that by the end of this year we'll have about $5 million in cash and reserves for capital improvements. The rates that have been charged in the past have been higher than other communities, and I say it's time to lower those rates in the way that an independent advisor told us last month we can do. That's a 45% reduction, and I'm fully in favor of it, and I will advocate that to the City Council. If we do that, our rates would be virtually the same as KPUD, and we would have the economies of scale preserved for our water utility. So it makes all the sense in the world to put together these services in a way that make both sewer and water and stormwater efficiently managed utilities for our community. I'm afraid this whole idea got started when a temporary senior manager was trying to settle the lawsuit with the Ratepayers Alliance. And perhaps as a peace gesture, he said, well, suppose I go ask KPUD if they take our water and sewer utility. He didn't even know at the time that KPUD isn't even legally authorized to run a sewer utility. So we got started on this foray on a sort of a shrug of the shoulders, and why don't we go ask? And I'm glad we did, because it taught us a lot. But after looking at it for 2 years, it's quite clear that we've spent 2 years building a very sound water utility with almost $5 million in reserves. All those rates that were too high for those years, those monies are now sitting for the benefit of our water utility in those reserves, and they're adequate to take care of the capital improvements that we'll need over the next 6 years. So those water rates are going to do good for us in Winslow, and why don't we take advantage of having control in our community over our own water utility, just as we wanted for sewer and the rest of government.
Would either of you two also entertain the idea that you're saying these things should be coupled together? Logically, you would couple them together, water and sewer.
There's a new piece of state legislation that would allow us to form a cooperative operation with KPUD. They serve 1,500 customers in northern Bainbridge. If we coupled our Winslow operation with theirs in North Bainbridge, we could build an intertie, and that would be great for an intertie, a pipe
both water and sewer.
that could water.
Just water.
They don't have the authority to do sewer. But if we connect the two water systems, we do a great thing for our aquifer. We draw equally from around the island.
So that's what you meant by cooperation.
Cooperation, that's right.
Okay, I think Barry points out one of the reasons that the citizens of Bainbridge Island are so frustrated. Over 2 years, we have analyzed and determined that sure enough, we could reduce our water cost by 50% to the ratepayers. And it took 2 years. And that is a frustration that the people have in terms of when they say there's an issue here, they want the city to listen to the issue, take the issue seriously, and often their sense is it's not taken as seriously as it could because it doesn't get accomplished in a timely manner. I don't think 2 years is a timely period to go and evaluate and determine that there's a 50% problem. If you had a 10 or 15% problem, then maybe you have to look at it very carefully. But if you've got a 50% problem and you determine that after a year and a half and having another consultant come in and make that assessment, it should have been higher on the priority list of doing work.
May I respond to that?
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that priority list question too.
Yeah, the response is it hasn't been studied for 2 years. For the first year and a half, we were still waiting for the courts to decide whether this lawsuit was going to keep us from financing our sewer and water system. It would have been irresponsible to lower our water rates when virtually all of the water reserves had to be loaned to the sewer to pay for a project, a $15 million project, that had to be completed and that the lawsuit was stopping. So it wouldn't have been responsible to lower the rates at that time. But now that the appeals court has told us we've prevailed, now that we're putting bonds out next month to finish the sewer project financing, now we know that that $4 to $5 million in reserves is there, ready to stand by, and we can safely and prudently lower water rates at the same time.
Kim, can you respond to both what Barry is saying is actually a good thing to hold on for the city? You still see a better deal from KPUD?
There's so much to respond to. My brain is reeling. I want to be very careful not to state a position about my feelings about a particular lawsuit, because my interest is in the ratepayers, not in the litigation. But I will say this, and talking about the ratepayers lawsuit is the reason not to reduce rates, to me makes me smile, because it seems to me that the only reason that we're having this conversation today is because there's community members that have taken to the courts to say that the way this utility is being run is completely unacceptable. And on the topic of how you frame an issue, if I may, I just want to address the idea of giving anything away. Barry's used this language both in our comment interchange and many times when he's addressing this issue in the campaign. I think it's very important for me to state the city has no right to quote, give anything away. The reserves that are connected to the water utility, by state law, belong to the ratepayers. Those reserves move with the ratepayers regardless of who runs this utility, be it the city, be it Kitsap PUD, be it a private company. This is not something that the city has like a cash register that it can choose to use as it wishes. I think it's very important rhetorically to talk about reserve funds as something that belongs to the people that have been reaching into their pocket and paying for it. One other thing, if you'll permit me another moment. Mr. Peters has said that any transfer of the sewer utility is just completely off the table. I'm not in a position now to speak authoritatively on this issue. I'm still in the process of investigating it. But from my preliminary investigations, it seems to me that there are some very interesting opportunities out there for us over the long term, and again, over the long term, to transfer our sewer utility. Those are options that I think the city has an obligation to explore thoroughly and not at the front end say simply don't exist.
May I respond to the last point about the sewer utility?
Very briefly, yes.
Yes. KPUD isn't authorized to do sewer. It would take an act of the state legislature. We've asked Kitsap County to do it. There was no reply because they don't see any advantage to sending their work crews to Bainbridge to operate a sewer plant in Winslow. There's a very highly qualified utility called West Sound Utility District. John Poppy's the plant manager. I spoke with him last week again. Yes, they've offered, if KPUD were authorized to run our sewer plant, West Sound and John Poppy would be glad to provide management consulting advice to help them learn how to do it. But John and his team are also in the business of helping any owner of a utility, and they would help the city of Bainbridge Island have a good close look at our sewer utility to make sure it's running efficiently. So there is no offer on the table that's been mentioned to me or any council member to take our sewer utility, and if you have a sewer utility and stormwater, to give away the water utility destroys the economies of scale of our operations.
Okay. Let's move ahead to kind of something that Stephen had brought up, that when you do set priorities, when you work in a city that's as active and involved as Bainbridge Island is, I guess Barry's had experiences for you, so you can tell us maybe how he has approached this, but how would you make sure that you are setting your priorities to what the people who elected you to do? How are you going to follow that? How are you going to get the feedback? How are you going to take direction from folks? I'll let Kim start this time.
I opened my comments today by saying there were things going on in city government that I'm optimistic about. One of them is the fact that we seem to be taking planning more seriously in terms of setting direction for both the administration and for the council. I'm very glad to see that there's an accountability plan in place to guide the actions of our executive department and our staff, but there's still not a strategic plan to guide the city council. One of the things I would like to do as a council member is to take a process that I suspect has already started and use all of my energy to make sure it keeps going. I think it's crucial the city council gets together and writes out a definitive plan, not a long one, not a complicated one, but it's a way to highlight what the projects are in priority that that particular council will be engaged on. So I do like strategic planning, but in addition to that necessarily collaborative process, I'm running on a platform that's short and sweet. My priorities as an individual council person are very clear. My priorities are back to basics spending, and for me that means roads, 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 and making those roads more accessible to bike users and pedestrians. I'm very much interested in economic vitality. Like Steve, I put a very high premium on small businesses, and I want to do what I can to make Bainbridge Island a better place to operate a home business or a small business with several employees. Finally, as I mentioned earlier in my talk, I'm very interested in the future of our police department, the relationships our officers have with our citizens, and the political culture around City Hall, the way people perceive of their relationship with government officials. I've said these three things are my priority as an individual council person, and I intend to spearhead efforts to put those three things into place. But I will say first and foremost, I'm a collaborative thinker. I like to work with a group I'm very interested in working with the next council and setting onto paper and on our website a comprehensive strategic plan.
You know, I appreciate Kim recognizing the change that we've been working over the last year and a half. For example, once we hired our city manager, we set up an accountability agreement, which is a one-year accountability plan for city council issues to be decided in an orderly way, rather than the way it used to be, which is what's the issue this week, how many people are in the audience asking us to do this week's issue du jour. The accountability agreement is something we review every quarter. We also review the city manager's performance. When we did that in April, the council members voted and assigned ranking to the most critical priorities for the remainder of this year. And we have a list that came out of that process, ranked in the first 10 highest ranked priorities as a clear message to our city manager of what we want to accomplish. Near the top of the list, for example, is the successful completion of the Winslow Way project, a project that how many councils for how many years kicked the can down the road and let the broken sewer pipes stay in the street. This year we're doing that project and we're going to get it done before Thanksgiving. And that project will repair sewer pipes, replace old asbestos water pipes. It will give us gardens and trees on our main street, and it'll do it for less than half the cost that the original proposal came to us in 2007. Furthermore, we have a 6-year capital facilities plan and a 2-year biennial budget that we enacted in 2008 to enable the budgeting process to work on a broader 2-year scope. So in all those ways, we are very wedded to strategic planning. Our deputy city manager is an expert on it. Morgan Smith has brought forward a strategic planning program, and that's part of the transition that I talked about that I want to be reelected to fulfill. Because we've started it for over a year to get on that track, we need another year with Morgan and with Brenda to complete that commitment to transform us into a strategic decision-making body instead of an issue of the day. What can we do today? What can we do tomorrow? So.
We have made a lot of progress, but it's also created, in my view, a lot of confusion. The process that we used to reduce staff was we had goals to reduce the staff, and the city manager did a good job and reduced the staff. From my perspective, before you reduce staff, you need to understand what the processes are. Otherwise, you slow down everything within the city, and people aren't able to accomplish what they need to accomplish. So if you have a process that takes a week to do, and you now cut the staff in half, that process is not going to take 2 weeks unless you change the process. So we didn't do it, in my view, an adequate job of defining those processes within the city that needed to be done. I believe that fundamentally the city needs to look at those tasks that are required by state and federal law that the city needs to provide. Understand what those things cost, and then everything else then is evaluated. City council then goes and prioritizes those other things that the city is doing and would like to do. Look at the budget that is remaining to do those things, and at that point in time have a proposed list for public comment to say, is the city council doing the will of the people for those things above and beyond those things that are mandated by law? Based on that, then go through and finalize the budget and then do those things that the citizens want. One of the things that has frustrated me looking now at the process that goes within the city council, and the Shoreline management plan is an example of that. The way the Shoreline management plan on Bainbridge Island was done, there was a guide that was prepared by the city staff, and it had the definition of whose role was to do what. And the very first thing is the city staff's role was to propose draft policy. The commissions and were to go, the citizens committees were to evaluate that, and then the council was to approve that. Well, what I didn't see is that in our form of government now, the city council is the policymaker. And I did not see anything indicating at the very beginning of the process that the city council established overall guiding policy for the city government and the city manager to go and flesh out. And as a result, I think we have a very contentious process right now. We're struggling through that. So I think that the mandate where we went and changed from a form of government where you had a mayor, city council, and the staff worked for the mayor, they were all integrated together, and so the staff was developing the policies as dictated by the mayor. When you change to a city manager form of government, the city council establishes the policy, and the city manager then implements that policy and generates the regulations that then the city council then has to go and approve. That last part is working, but the first part where the city council establishes policy for what is ongoing within the city government is not happening. And if I'm elected city council, that's one of the key elements that I want to instill in the city council is the accountability of the city council to define what the city is doing, going through the process where the public reviews that policy before the policy becomes finalized, and then that is the guidelines that the city manager then takes in and implements within the city.
Could I just reply to that issue of accountability and policy as applied to the size of our city, just to close out that issue on employee numbers? When I started, there were 152 employees in our city. Today, there are 111. That's a sad story, but it's also a necessary transition story. It took 3.5 years to achieve that result, and I'm, in a way, think it was wise to do that step by step. The last step being done by our new city manager as a careful reorganization, so it wasn't just off with their heads, it was a careful analysis of what departments can we support with the revenues we've got. And I worked for 15 years at Verizon, and we had 10,000 staff reductions over those years. And I learned that when you just cut numbers, you lose efficiency, you lose experience, and you lose skills, as Steve was alluding. But we didn't do it that way. We did it over 3.5 years, and it took the leadership and the policy accountability of the council, not pointing fingers at the staff and saying, you know, why aren't you, city manager, doing something? We decided in the budget season last year that we just had to make that last painful move from 130 employees, 125 by the end of the year, down to 111. It was painful. It took leadership, but the city council, as Steve said, is accountable for policy making, and there's no more basic policy than the policy is of how large is the city and how much is it spending. And we've achieved an extraordinary transformation of the city in the last 3.5 years. We need more work, but we're on the road to a very effective and successful transformation.
I'd like to come in on staff cuts. It's such an interesting issue. And I think it really accentuates some of the differences that I have with my two opponents as well. Both of my opponents are very focused on efficiency, and I think that's important, and that's something that voters are interested in. But I guess the theme of my campaign is more about quality of life and the way that people feel about their government and the way employees feel about working for City Hall. I am so saddened that the union that we deal with on City Hall employees' issues has gone into grievance and arbitration about the way that our City Hall handled this recent round of reorganizations and firings. Just like I don't want to talk about the merits of the ratepayer lawsuit, I don't want to talk about the merits of the union complaints, but I am just so incredibly saddened that it's gotten to the point where one of the largest unions in the state has taken an adversarial stance with our city when I think in my optimistic heart that many people that work for city government understand the constraints that cities are facing and are willing to go to the table and give things up and negotiate. The fact that this is something that ended up in such a confrontational place troubles me greatly, and it's one of the focuses of my campaign. I don't talk about cutting more staff in any of my campaign material. It might have to be done. If it is, it's not something that I welcome or embrace. On the topic of city staff, what I want to talk about that my fellow candidates are not talking about, how do you improve that culture at City Hall so employees find efficiencies themselves and enjoy coming to work and have the right orientation so they want to deliver a type of customer service that we've never been able to deliver before? How do you empower employees so their opinions are actually welcomed by management?
What's your answer to those questions?
You take your lower line employees and the people that are working on the interface experiences with customers, you take their advice and their input extremely seriously, and you get to know how valuable you think they are. And this same sort of, I guess, more fungible or bottom-up approach to how you manage a staff is something that I very much like to explore with our police department as well. I think there's a lot to be gained with a very linear top-down management system, but there's a whole lot to be lost as well, and that's the sort of human relations, the sort of cultural issue that I'm really engaged in. And with apologies if I'm speaking.
No, thank you.
I'd like to make a
Actually,
comment.
we go here and here.
Okay.
I'd like you to say a question. I mean, go ahead.
When I talked about reorganizing and consolidating facilities, the specific process that I used was you go in and you get an organization chart, and you understand how the organization is put together from the organization chart. You go and you talk to the top management, and from there on you go and you start at the bottom of the organization. And it was me, not a functionary, but I was the one that sat down with the bottom of the organization, and you start talking to the individual people, asking them, one, what it is that you do, what is it that you think you could do better, and how they view the organization looking up. Once you go through that process, you then take that off, you assimilate that, and you then go back and say, you know, this process in the organization is broken in these areas. There are efficiencies to be gained in these areas, and you identify those. That then goes back into the senior management within the organization to go and fix. That's the process that you use. That's the process I've used successfully for thousands of employees.
Answer the second thing that Kim kind of tried to address is how you then inspire change in morale in City Hall. Or are you saying those are part of the same process?
It's exactly the same process, because if you talk to the people and they go and they said, well, you know, my job would be a lot easier if X, Y, Z were to happen. They go and they see, after talking to you, they see that that happens. Morale instantly changes and it gets better. And at the same time, the senior management knows that they're being evaluated by implementing those changes. So that whole process provides a reduction in can provide a reduction in the staff. It provides increased morale, because the people at the bottom of the organization all the way through feel like they are now empowered. Most of those people are not used to having, if you will, the boss or come in and talk to them, and that in itself gives them more valuation of self-worth. So that whole process does exactly what Kim's talking about, and that's the process I used for 10 years, not only with Northrop, but as an independent consultant after I left Northrop.
With respect, I think Steve's confused about the difference between a manager and a policymaker. The City Council is prohibited under Washington state law from interfering with management relations between the city manager and the staff. We can set policies. And I'll tell you what I've learned from 2 years of looking at, say, the issue of how effectively our planners and folks at the counter work with our citizens. There are two things that are needed, and we are fixing both of them. We spent the last 2 years rewriting our zoning code because it was a patched together combination of confusion and inconsistencies. In about 2 months, we're going to have an entirely rewritten zoning code that those folks at the counter will be able to explain to the customers they serve. Second thing is, I went to Brenda Bauer last month. I said, Brenda, I'm a volunteer mediator at the Kitsap Dispute Resolution Center. I just went to a seminar to talk about how do people engage with one another in a way that works for both sides of the equation. There is training available when employees are faced with crucial conversations with a customer over the counter. That conversation can be good and productive and trusting and facilitating and helpful, or it can be out of fear and defensiveness. Training can help in that, and we've had such thin money in the last few years, we've cut back on training. Our employees deserve to have the kind of training that I learned about at a mediation session, which is designed to help people have good and productive conversations with the public customers they serve. We can do that. And Kim mentioned bad relations with the union. We actually have 2 unions. And in the other union, we've had such good relations that we have had 0% salary adjustments in the last 2 years.
Who's represented in that one?
That's the police
That's the
guild.
police.
So the police guild, because of the relationship on the union dimension, I mean, we can talk about community
Well, I hope we
relations.
talk about the police guild. That would be-
But the police guild has agreed for 2 straight years to give a 0 COLA, a 0 salary increase, when most employees are pressing, as is the other union, for more. So there's, again, a good transition in progress. We need to continue that. I think I can apply the experience of the last 4 years to continuing that transition.
Okay. Certainly the police would have been an issue, but we've run out of time and we have another city council race to come up. Like I said, we'll do the online questionnaires, and it will be a question there that you'll all have a chance to address there and hopefully have some dialogue. And I know there's another forum like this on the 26th.
May I make a shameless plug
correct?
for a few forums that are coming up?
Yes, tell us when the forums are. That'd be great.
Thank you.
actually.
2 of the
'Cause
3 of us will be appearing at something called the Treehouse Cafe this coming Sunday.
Sunday.
It's a gathering of all the city council candidates that live on the south end of the island that are running for city council seats. So that's Steve Winkowski. I'll be there, Robert Daschle and Sarah Blossom. So 4 of us will be at the Treehouse on Sunday. Tuesday, the League of Women Voters, right, are hosting something at City Hall that starts at 6:30 with all primary candidates. And I might add that the following Friday, I'm sorry I don't have the date, Fairbank Construction will be holding a forum where I believe all city council candidates are invited to talk about business development issues.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. Thank you each for coming in. Like I said,
The one thing I wish we had had more time to talk about is the relationship of the city to the county. And there are so many ways that we have been working on that, and we could do more. I'd love to correspond with you individually about that, because there are about 7 or 8 ways that agencies in this county, port authorities, Poulsbo doing so well with its downtown revitalization. We have much to learn on Bainbridge from the successes there. I'm glad I've been on the Economic Development Alliance, KEDA, here in Kitsap, to work on those issues. We have much to learn about how to work as a county as a whole.
And that relationship is what got us $900,000 to repair
Kitsap
Rockaway.
Regional Coordinating Council
correct.
understood our emergency on Rockaway Road and approved almost $1 million for us.
well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ben, we appreciate you coming in.